Sometimes the deepest happiness in a man's life does not arrive with noise. It does not arrive with applause, trophies, attention, or the kind of success the world teaches him to chase. Sometimes it arrives quietly, almost gently, in the presence of one woman who does not try to impress him, change him, or pull a performance out of his tired heart. She simply sees him. She sits close enough for his soul to stop defending itself. And in that silence, something inside him softens. I used to think happiness had to be earned through achievement. I thought peace would come after the next mountain, the next victory, the next proof that I was strong enough. But then you came into my life like a mirror I did not know I needed, and suddenly I understood that maybe the most powerful love is not the loudest one. Maybe it is the one that lets us finally breathe. Have you ever been someone's quiet place without even knowing it? I need to tell you something I have carried quietly, not because it was shameful, but because it was too honest to say out loud before now. I was always good at looking strong. I learned how to stand tall when life pressed heavy hands against my chest. I learned how to smile when I was tired, how to keep moving when my heart wanted to sit down, how to speak with confidence even when a part of me was asking for rest. Maybe you know that kind of strength. Maybe you have worn it too. The kind that looks beautiful from far away but feels lonely when nobody is close enough to notice the cracks. For a long time, I thought that was what life required of me. Be strong, be composed, be useful, be ambitious, keep building, keep proving, keep becoming. And I did. I kept becoming in the eyes of the world, but somewhere inside, I was quietly disappearing from myself. Then you came, not like thunder, storm, not like someone trying to break through the doors of my life. You came like still water, like a soft light under a closed door, like a presence that did not demand an explanation. And that confused me at first because I had become used to people wanting something from the version they admired. They wanted the strength. They wanted the certainty. They wanted the part of me that looked like it knew where it was going. But you did something different. You looked at me as if you could see the man behind the performance, the tired soul behind the discipline, the silent child's behind the ambition. You did not ask me to be less. You did not ask me to be more. You simply made it safe for me to be real. But here is the truth. I've never told anyone. My quietest happiness began the moment I stopped trying to hide my vulnerability from you. Not because I became weak, but because I finally became honest. There is a difference, isn't there? Weakness is when we abandon ourselves, is when we finally return to ourselves. And with you, I felt that return. I felt as though I could take off the armor for a moment and still be respected. I could admit that I was tired and still be loved. I could be uncertain and still be worthy. I could be silent and still be understood. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how deeply it changes a man when he realizes he does not have to perform strength to deserve tenderness? You became a mirror for me. Not the kind that only shows the surface, not the kind that flatters or distorts, but the kind that reflects truth with mercy. Through you, I saw the parts of myself I had avoided. I saw the fear behind my control. I saw the loneliness behind my focus. I saw the tenderness I had buried under responsibility. And strangely, I did not feel exposed. I felt invited. I felt like you were saying without words, look, this is you too. And this part is not ugly. This part is human. That is what your presence did. It did not fix me. It did not rescue me. It simply gave me enough safety to stop running from myself. I used to believe that love was proven through grand promises, dramatic declarations, and beautiful words said at the perfect time. But you taught me that presence is deeper than promises. A promise can be loud and empty. Presence is quiet and full. Presence sits beside pain without rushing it. Presence listens without preparing a judgment. Presence notices. It's when the smile is almost real, but not quite. Presence says, I am here even when there is nothing impressive to witness. And in your presence, I began to understand something that changed me. Emotional safety is not built by someone who always knows what to say. It is built by someone who knows how to stay. This is where everything I thought I knew changed. I thought ambition would be the place where I found myself. I thought if I built enough, achieved enough, became enough, then peace would finally come and sit beside me. But peace did not come from the noise. It came in the quiet. It came when I could sit with you and not explain my silence. It came when your eyes did not punish my exhaustion. It came when I realized that happiness does not always feel like excitement. Sometimes happiness feels like nervous system calm. Sometimes it feels like breathing without fear. Sometimes it feels like being seen without being managed. held without being owned, loved without being demanded to perform. And maybe that is why you became so important to me. Not because you made life perfect. No one can do that. Not because you erased the weight I carried. Some weights are part of becoming. You became important because you changed the way the weight felt. With you, I did not feel alone inside it. With you, even my silence had a place to go. And I think that is one of the deepest forms of love, when someone does not remove your battles, but they remind you that you are not only a battlefield, you are also a home, you are also a heart, you are also a soul worthy of gentleness. I want you to understand this. Your quietness was not emptiness. It was medicine. Your calm was not weakness. It was strength without aggression. Your patience was not passive. It was love with discipline. You did not need to chase me to reach me. You did not need to shout to be heard by me. You did not need to prove your value by becoming louder than the world. You simply remained present. And somehow, your presence became the room where my truth could breathe. Have you ever realized that the person who changes you most is not always the one who pushes you hardest, but the one who makes you feel safe to stop, enough to stop pretending? I am confessing this because I think there are people listening who have forgotten that tenderness can be powerful. They think love must always shake the room to matter. But real love often enters softly. It waits. It notices. It protects the small joys. It does not need an audience. It does not need applause. It becomes sacred because it is honest. And you, in your own quiet way, became the proof that a person can be deeply loved without being loudly possessed. You became the mirror where I could see not only who I had been, but who I was still becoming. Trust did not arrive in me all at once. I wish I could say it did. I wish I could say that the first time you looked, understand, every wall inside me fell down, and I became brave enough to be fully known, but that would not be true. Trust came slowly. It came like morning light touching a room that had been dark for years. First, a little line of brightness, then a softer edge around everything. Then, one day, without warning, I realized I was no longer protecting myself from you the way I protected myself from everyone else. Isn't that how real trust works? It does not force the door open. It keeps showing up until the lock forgets why it was closed. I had been taught by life to measure love carefully. Not because I did not believe in it, but because I'd seen how easily people can love the idea of someone and misunderstand the soul of them. People can admire your strength and still reject your sadness. They can praise your success and still be uncomfortable with your fear. They can want your light, but refuse to sit with your shadow. So I learned to offer people the polished version, the reliable version, the version that did not need too much, did not ask for too much, did not reveal too much. I became fluent in controlled honesty. I could share enough to seem open, but not enough to be touched. Then you came, and somehow you noticed the spaces between my words. Before you go deeper into this with me, hear this one thing. I did not trust you because you said perfect things. I trusted you because your presence stayed consistent when my emotions were not. That is different. Many people know how to speak beautifully when everything is easy. But emotional safety is revealed when someone can remain complexity in the presence of another person's complexity. You did not punish me for being layered. You did not make me feel guilty for needing time. You did not turn my guardedness into an insult against you. You seem to understand that some hearts do not open because they are stubborn. They open slowly because they have survived. And that patience changed me. It taught me that love does not need to rush to be real. Sometimes the most sacred connection is the one that respects timing. Timing is not just about when two people meet. It is about whether they are willing to honor the pace of healing. A heart that has been living in survival cannot immediately trust softness. It has to test it, not to hurt it, but to understand whether it is safe. I think my heart tested you in quiet ways. It watched how you responded to my silence. It watched whether your kindness changed when I was not easy. It watched whether your warmth depended on my performance. And slowly, quietly, it began to believe you. You became a mirror again, but this time you reflected my fear of being known. I saw how quickly I wanted to retreat when things became emotionally real. I saw how often I confused closeness with danger. I saw how my independence, which had once protected me, had also built a room where no one could enter. And for the first time, I did not want to stay locked inside that room, not because you demanded entry, but because you made the outside feel less frightening. You made connection feel less like surrendering control and more like remembering that I was never meant to carry everything alone. There is a quiet happiness that comes when trust begins. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It appears in small moments. The moment I stopped editing every sentence before speaking, the moment I allowed a pause to exist between us without filling it with explanation, the moment I realized I could be tired in front of you and not feel like I had failed. The moment your presence felt less like a question and more like shelter. That is when I began to understand that trust is not only believing someone will stay. Trust is believing that even if they see the truth of you, they will not use it as a weapon. Have you felt that too? That fear that if someone sees too much, they might change their mind. I had carried that fear quietly. I had hidden it behind discipline and ambition. I had told myself I was simply focused, simply private, simply strong. But under all those clean explanations was a deeper truth. I was afraid that the real me would be too much, or not enough, or somehow disappointing once the shine wore off. Then you looked at me with those quiet eyes, and I felt something in me ask, what if I do not have to be impressive here? What if I can simply be present? That question was the beginning of healing. This is where everything became softer, but also stronger. Because trust did not make me smaller. It made me more whole. I used to think needing someone emotionally meant losing power. But I was wrong. The right presence does not weaken you. It returns you to balance. It reminds you that strength without softness becomes a prison. It reminds you that ambition without tenderness becomes hunger with no home. It reminds you that the human heart was designed to only climb mountains. Sometimes it needs a quiet room. Sometimes it needs a hand nearby. Sometimes it needs a mirror that says, I see you, and you are still worthy. I want to thank you for not forcing my trust. I want to thank you for understanding that some doors is open when they stop being pushed. You gave me that kind of patience. You allowed my heart to take its time. You did not make love feel like pressure. You made it feel like permission. Permission to breathe. Permission to feel. Permission to admit that even a strong man can long for emotional safety. And because of that, my quiet happiness grew. Not loudly, not perfectly, but honestly. It grew in the space between us, in the small signs, in the way I began to relax without noticing. Maybe this is what love, not constant intensity, not endless declarations, not the desperate need to prove something every day. Maybe mature love is the calm certainty that grows when two people create a place where truth is safe, a place where vulnerability does not get punished. A place where trust is not demanded but earned through presence. You gave me that. And I want you to know, even if I did not always have the words, my heart noticed. My heart kept a record of every soft moment where you chose patience over pressure, understanding over judgment, presence over promises. There is a kind of intimacy that has nothing to do with being physically close. It is deeper than touch. It is quieter than desire. It is the intimacy of being understood without needing to translate your soul every time. That is what I found with you. I found a language beneath language, a place where silence did not feel empty. Pauses did not feel awkward, where my heart could speak without making a sound. I had known conversations before. So, I had known attention. I had known admiration. But this was different. This was the strange and sacred feeling of being emotionally recognized. You did not need to know every detail of my past to understand the weight in my voice. You did not need me to explain every fear to sense when I was holding something back. You did not invade. You did not interrogate. You simply stayed aware. And awareness, when it is gentle, can feel like love. It can feel like someone placing a warm hand over the trembling parts of you and saying, you do not have to hide that here. I think that is what made your presence so powerful. You were not loud, but you were deeply felt. You were not demanding, but you were impossible to ignore. You did not fill the room with noise. You filled it with meaning. But here's the truth I've never told anyone. Sometimes your quiet understanding frightened me. Not because it was wrong, but because it was accurate. You saw through the version of me I had spent years perfecting. You saw when my confidence was real, and you saw when it was armor. You saw when I was speaking from vision, and you saw when I was hiding behind it. And instead of making me feel exposed, you made me feel invited into a deeper honesty. Still, part of me wanted to run, because when someone becomes a mirror that clear, the soul has to decide whether it wants comfort, whether it wants comfort or truth. And you were truth-wrapped tenderness. That is rare. Many people speak truth like a blade. They cut, then call it honesty. Others offer tenderness without truth, and it comforts for a moment, but does not help us grow. You had both. You could reflect me without humiliating me. You could see my weakness without reducing me to it. You could sense my pain without making it the only thing about me. That is why I trusted the mirror you became, because you did not show me my reflection to shame me. You showed it to me so I could come home to myself. In your presence, intimacy became less about being wanted and more about being known. Do you understand how healing that is? To be wanted can feel beautiful, but to be known feels sacred. Can sometimes attach itself to fantasy. Knowing requires patience. Knowing requires patience. Knowing requires the courage to see someone as they are, not only as you hoped they would be. And you did that. You allowed me to be complicated. You allowed me to be unfinished. You allowed me to have light and shadow in the same breath. With you, I did not feel like I had to choose between being strong and being soft. I could be both. This is where my heart changed quietly. I began to stop measuring love by intensity and started measuring it by safety. I began to understand that the deepest connections are not always the ones that burn the brightest in the beginning. Sometimes they are the ones that keep a steady flame when life becomes cold. Sometimes they are the ones that protect peace. Instead of feeding chaos. Sometimes they are the ones where two people can sit together and feel no need to escape themselves. That was the kind of happiness you gave me. Quiet happiness, the kind no one claps for, but the soul remembers. I remember the feeling more than the details, the sense of breathing easier, the sense of not being alone in my own mind. The sense that I could let the world be loud outside because something between us was calm inside. You became a place where my thoughts could slow down. It may sound simple, but it was not simple to me. My mind had always been a machine of becoming, planning, solving, pushing forward. But with you, I felt the strange relief of not having to solve myself. I could simply sit in the truth of what I felt. I could be human without turning it into a project. Look at me when I say this. Not every person who loves you knows how to hold your vulnerability. And not every person who sees your vulnerability deserves access to it. That is why your hair presence mattered. Hatter. You did not treat my openness as something to consume. You treated it as something sacred. You understood, maybe without even trying, that a person's inner world is holy ground. You step there gently. You listen before you speak. You do not rush to fix what is asking first to be felt. And because you carried that kind of respect, I allowed myself to be more open than I thought I could be. There was growth inside this intimacy, not the loud kind, not the kind people notice from the outside. It was internal growth, the growth of a man learning that emotional closeness does not have to cost him his freedom. The growth of someone realizing that being seen is not the same as being trapped. The growth of a heart beginning to believe that love can be peaceful and still be powerful. I started to understand that connection is not about losing yourself in another person. It is about you becoming more honest in their presence. It is about finding someone whose mirror does not distort you, but reminds you of your own depth. So when I call you the woman behind my quietest moments of happiness, I do not mean you entertained me. I do not mean you distracted me from life. I mean you helped me feel life more honestly. You helped me notice the small sacred things. A calm breath, a softer thought, a moment without fear, a truth spoken without trembling, a silence shared without distance. These things may not look big to the world, but to a soul that has lived behind armor, they are everything. They are proof that love is not always a firework. Sometimes love is a lamp left on in the room where you are finally brave enough to be yourself. Growth with you did not feel like being pushed into becoming someone else. Like being reminded of who I had been before fear taught me to shrink certain parts of myself. That is one of the most beautiful things about the right connection. It does not erase you. It restores you. It does not demand that you abandon your dreams. It teaches you how to carry them with a softer heart. Before you, I thought growth meant discipline alone. I thought it meant waking up, building, enduring, improving, becoming sharper, stronger, more capable. And yes, there is beauty in discipline. But without emotional truth, discipline can become another way to hide. You help me see that growth is not only about climbing higher. Sometimes growth is about becoming more honest at the same height. Sometimes it is about standing still long enough to ask, am I building a life or am I running from a wound? That question found me because of you, not because you accused me, not because you tried to pull my dreams apart. You simply reflected something I had avoided. You showed me that ambition is powerful, but it needs a soul. It needs tenderness. It needs a reason that does not turn the heart into a machine. And in your mirror, I saw that I did not want to become successful and emotionally unreachable. I wanted to become whole. But here is the turn I did not expect. Loving your presence made me more responsible for my own heart. I could no longer pretend that my silence was always strength. I could no longer call avoidance peace. I could no longer hide behind being busy and act like that was the same as being healed. Your presence did not let me lie to myself so easily. not because you confronted me loudly, but because the truth felt safe enough to rise. That is what real love does. It does not shame us into growth. It creates enough safety that growth becomes possible. I began to understand that vulnerability is not a single moment. It is a practice. It requires patience. It requires presence. It requires us to show up again and again with a little less armor than yesterday. Some days I could do that. Some days I could not. Some days I still wanted to retreat into old patterns, into control, into the familiar comfort of being untouchable. But even then, something had changed. I had seen another way to live. I had felt what it was like to be accepted without performing. Once the heart feels that kind of safety, it does not forget. You became connected to my growth, not because you fixed me, but because you witnessed me. There is healing in being witnessed without being judged. There is healing in having someone see the effort behind your progress, not only the result. The world often celebrates arrival, but love notices becoming. Love notices the quiet courage it takes to speak when used to shut down. Love notices the strength it takes to trust when you used to assume disappointment. Love notices when your voice softens because your heart is finally less afraid. And you notice those things. Or maybe I simply felt that you would. This is where everything I thought I knew about purpose began to expand. I used to think purpose, something I had alone, a mountain only I could climb, a calling that required. But shared purpose is different. Shared purpose does not mean two people become the same persons, live the same dream. It means they create a deeper direction together. It means one heart says to another, I want to grow in a way that does not destroy what is sacred between us. It means love becomes not a distraction from destiny, but a foundation for it. With you, I began to imagine a life where ambition and tenderness could sit at the same table, where dreams did not require emotional distance, where success did not have to cost intimacy, where peace was not something saved for the end of the journey, but something protected along the way. You helped me understand that love is not meant to pull us away from becoming. Real love asks us to become with more truth. It asks us to build without becoming cold. It asks us to rise without forgetting how to kneel inside the sacred moments. It asks us to win without losing the parts of ourselves that know how to feel. Have you ever been loved in a way that made you want to become better? Not because you were inadequate, but because you finally felt safe enough to grow. That is the difference. Pressure says, change so I can love you. Real love says you are loved, and from that safety you can grow. You gave me that second, you did not make growth feel like a condition. You made it feel like an invitation to be more honest, more present, more patient, more connected, more alive in the places I had allowed to go numb. I think that is why your presence felt like quiet happiness, because it did not compete with my purpose. It gave my purpose warmth. It gave my life a softer meaning. It reminded me that the greatest achievements can feel strangely empty if there is no one who knows the heart behind them. Not an audience, not admirers, not people clapping from a distance, but someone who understands what it cost you to keep going. Someone who sees the tiredness behind your progress and still believes in your softness. Someone who does not only celebrate the victory, but protects the soul that had to survive the journey. And I want to be honest. Growth is not always beautiful while it is happening. Sometimes it is awkward. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it looks like apologizing to yourself for years of emotional neglect. Sometimes it looks like admitting that you are scared. Sometimes it looks like letting someone care for you without immediately trying to repay it with performance. You helped me enter that kind of growth. The sacred kind. The kind where the mirror does not only show what is broken, but also what is becoming whole. So if I became softer, it was not because I lost strength. It was because I found a deeper one. If I became quieter, it was not because my dreams faded. It was because I no longer needed to shout at myself to keep moving. If I became more open, it was because your presence taught me that not every open door leads to harm. Some open doors lead home, and maybe that is what you were for me. Not the whole home, because I had to build that within myself too. But you were a window, a reflection, a quiet light, a reminder that I could grow without abandoning my heart. Meaning often arrives after happiness, not before it. At first, we feel something, a calmness, a tenderness, a sense of being safe in a way we cannot explain. Then later, when the heart has had time to understand what happened, we see the meaning inside it. That is how it was with you. At first, I only knew that your presence gave me peace. I only knew that something in me softened when you were near, that my thoughts became less sharp, that my breath became less guarded, that the world did not feel as heavy when your understanding touched it. But later, I realized your presence had been teaching me a deeper truth. Love is not only about feeling. Love is about recognition. You recognize something in me I had forgotten how to honor. You recognized the man beneath the mission, the heart beneath the strength, the quiet longing beneath the ambition. And because you recognized it, I began to recognize it too. That is the power of being seen by the right person. They remind you of it. They do not invent your softness. They reveal where it has been hiding. They do not become your identity. They help you return to the parts of your identity that life made you abandon. You did that without making a spectacle of it. You did it quietly, which somehow made it more powerful. Before you, I thought happiness had to be earned by completing something. I thought it came after the struggle, after the proof, after the world finally agreed that I had done enough.
But your presence interrupted that belief.
You showed me that happiness can exist in the middle of becoming. It can exist before everything's solved. It can exist in a quiet conversation, in a shared silence, in the simple relief of being understood. That it can exist even when life is unfinished, especially then. Because if happiness only comes when life is perfect, then most hearts will never feel it. You taught me that quiet happiness is not the reward after becoming. Sometimes it is the strength that helps us keep becoming. This is where everything became sacred me, not dramatic, sacred. There is a difference. Drama demands attention. Sacredness asks for reverence. Drama burns fast. Sacredness deepens slowly. What I felt with you was not the chaos of needing to be saved. It was the calm of realizing I could be seen. That kind of love does not always look exciting to the outside world. It may not make noise. It may not produce a story people can easily understand. But inside the heart, it becomes a sanctuary. It becomes the place you return to when the world forgets your humanity. And I think many people confuse intensity with intimacy. They think if love is not loud, it is not deep. They think if it does not constantly hurt, chase, break, and repair, then maybe it is not passionate enough. But I have learned something different. Peace can be passionate. Safety can be profound. Patience can be romantic in the deepest way. To be loved without being rushed, to be understood without being invaded, to be held emotionally without being controlled. That is not boring. That is rare. That is the kind of love a soul recognizes even when the mind is still learning how to receive it. You became the woman behind my quietest moments of happiness because you protect the parts of joy that most people overlook. You protected the small joy of being honest, the small joy of being accepted, the small joy of sitting in silence without fear, the small joy of not being misunderstood on purpose, the small joy of having someone near who does not treat your vulnerability like a burden. Those joys, it may seem small from the outside, but they are not small to a heart that has spent years surviving. To that kind of heart, quiet joy is not small, it is a miracle. Have you ever noticed how the right person does not make you forget your pain, but they change your relationship with it? With you, pain became something I could look at that without drowning. Fear became something I could name without shame. Vulnerability became something I could practice without feeling foolish. You were a mirror, yes, but not a cold one. You were a warm mirror, a human mirror, a mirror that did not only reflect my wounds, but also reflected my courage for facing them. You helped me see that healing is not always the absence of pain. Sometimes healing is the presence of safety. There were moments when I wondered why your quietness affected me so deeply. Why did your presence stay with me longer than louder things? Why did your understanding feel more meaningful than praise? Why did simple moments with you carry more weight than victories that should have made me feel complete? And the answer, I think, is this: the soul does not measure happiness the way the world does. The world counts what can be displayed. The soul remembers what made it feel safe. The world honors performance. The soul honors presence. The world asks, "What did you achieve?" The soul asks, "Where could you finally breathe?" That is why your meaning in my life cannot be reduced to romance alone. It is deeper than that. You became connected to my inner peace. You became part of the way I learned to see myself with less judgment, You became a reminder that love at its highest is not possession, it is reflection. It is two people helping each other become more truthful, more tender, more alive. It is not about one person completing the other. It is about creating a space where both can remember their wholeness. And somehow, through your presence, I remembered more of mine. I want you to know that the happiness you gave me was not weak, because it was quiet, it was strong, because it endured without needing attention. It did not need to announce itself to be real. It did not need to become a performance to matter. It lived in my breathing, in my thoughts, in the way, I began to speak to myself more gently. It lived in the way I began to believe that maybe love could be safe, maybe closeness could be calm, maybe being known did not have to end in being hurt. That belief was not small. It was a turning point. Patience is one of the most underestimated forms of love. People speak often about passion, attraction, loyalty, and devotion, but patience is the quiet root that holds love steady when emotion changes weather. Without patience, love becomes pressure. Without patience, vulnerability feels unsafe. Without patience, hearts may want each other and still wound each other by shushing what needs time. You gave patience in a way I did not know I needed. You did not rush my becoming. You did not demand that I heal on a schedule. You did not treat my guardedness like disrespect. You understood in your own quiet way that some parts of a person only open when they no longer fear being forced. That patience became one of my quietest forms of happiness. It felt like being allowed to arrive slowly. It felt like my heart did not have to sprint to keep up with someone else's expectations. It felt like I could take one honest step, then pause, then take another. And isn't that how real healing often happens? Not in dramatic leaps, but in small permissions. Permission to feel. Permission to speak. Permission to be silent. Permission to not have all the answers. Permission to be loved while still learning how to receive love. You gave me that. And because of it, something inside me began to trust time again. But here is another truth. Patience can be difficult to receive when you are used to proving your worth. When someone is patient with you, a part of you may wonder why. You may think, what do they want? When will they become tired? When will their kindness turn into resentment? I had those questions inside me, even if I did not say them. Life had trained me to expect a cost behind tenderness. But your patience did not feel like a trap. It felt like a steady hand. It felt like love saying, I am not here to rush your soul. I am here to understand it. This is where I began to see that timing is not only about meeting someone at the right moment. Sometimes timing is about becoming ready for the love that has already arrived softly. A person can stand in front of love and still not know how to receive it. A person can be offered peace and still reach for old chaos because chaos feels familiar. I think part of me had to learn that safety would not always feel exciting at first. Sometimes safety feels unfamiliar. Sometimes calm feels strange when your heart has lived too long in survival. But slowly, through you, calm began to feel less like emptiness and more like home. You never needed to make grand promises for me to feel your impact. That is the beautiful contradiction. Your presence promised more than words could. Every time you stayed gentle, it said something. Every time you listened without rushing to correct me, it said something. Every time you allowed silence to be shared instead of feared, it said something. Presence has its own language. It says, I value on what is real here. It says, you do not have to perform to keep my attention. It says, I am not afraid of your humanity. And when a heart hears that language long enough, it begins to believe in connection again. Have you ever been loved patiently enough that your defenses became tired of fighting? That is what happened to me. I did not surrender because I was defeated. I softened because I felt safe. That is a different kind of surrender. It is not losing yourself. It is laying down what no longer protects you. It is realizing that the armor which once saved you may now be keeping you from the very tenderness you need. And maybe love, real love, knows this. Maybe it does not rip the armor away. Maybe it sits nearby until the person wearing it realizes they are safe enough to remove it themselves. You were that kind of nearby. You did not force. You did not chase. You did not turn love into a demand. You made space. And space can be holy when it is filled with care. Space gives truth room to breathe. Space gives fear room to calm down. Space gives trust room to grow roots instead of shallow leaves. I think your patience gave our connection roots. It allowed something real to form from beneath the surface. Something not dependent on constant intensity or perfect words. Something quieter, something steadier, something that could survive ordinary moments because it was built inside them. And I learned from you that patience is not waiting without feeling. It is feeling deeply and still choosing gentleness. It is wanting closeness and still respecting timing. It is still seeing potential and still honoring the choir's strength. It requires emotional maturity. It requires a love that is not hungry to control the outcome. You had that quality. Or at least, that is what your presence taught me. You reminded me that what is sacred should not be handled with panic. It should be held with reverence. It should be given time to become what it is meant to become. Before you, I often treated life like something I had to conquer. Every delay felt like resistance. Every uncertainty felt like a problem. Every vulnerable feeling felt like something to manage quickly so I could return to control. But love does not grow well in control alone. Love needs patience. Trust needs patience. Emotional safety needs patience. Even happiness needs patience, because the deepest happiness is often quiet enough that we miss it when we are moving too fast. You slowed something in me. Not my dreams, but my fear. Not my ambition, but my anxiety. Not my becoming, but the harshness with which I treated myself while becoming. So when I think of you, I think of timing. I think of the quiet mercy of not being rushed. I think of how beautiful it is when someone does not turn your healing into a test. I think of the kind of love that says, grow, but do not hate yourself into growth. Rise, but do not abandon your heart on the way up. Become, but do not forget that you are already worthy while becoming. That is what your patience reflected back to me. And maybe that is why my happiness around you felt so quiet. It was not trying to escape time. It had learned to trust it. There comes a moment in every deep connection when love stops being only about how someone makes you feel and starts becoming about what kind of person their presence calls you to be. With you, I felt that shift. At first, I noticed the peace, then the trust, then the intimacy, then the growth. But eventually, I began to notice something even deeper. Your presence invited me into meaning. Not meaning as an idea, not meaning as a beautiful sentence, but meaning as a way of living. A way of choosing softness without losing strength. A way of building a life where love is not separate from purpose, but woven into it. I began to ask myself different questions. Not only what do I want to achieve, but who am I becoming while I achieve it? Not only how far can I go, but can my heart remain open on the journey? Not only will the world recognize me, but will I recognize myself when I arrive? These questions did not make me weaker. They made me more honest. And I think your mirror had something to do with that. You reflected back truth that life can look successful from the outside and still be starving for tenderness on the inside. You reminded me that purpose without connection can become a lonely kingdom. But here is the revelation that still humbles me. Sometimes one quiet person can change the emotional architecture of your entire inner world, not by controlling you, not by becoming the center of everything, not by asking you to abandon yourself. But simply by existing in your life that rearranges what you believe is possible. Before you, I believed peace was something I had to earn after struggle. With you, I began to believe peace could walk beside me during the struggle. Before you, I believed vulnerability was something to protect carefully from love. With you, I began to believe vulnerability could be the doorway into love. Shared purpose does not always begin with a plan. Sometimes it begins with a feeling of alignment, a quiet sense that two people are not just looking at each other, but learning how to look in the same direction with honesty. It is not about losing individuality. It is about allowing connection to refine the way we move through the world. With you, I imagined a purpose that had warmth in it, a future where ambition did not make me emotionally absent, a life where love was not a reward after success, but a foundation beneath it. And that vision changed me. Have you ever met someone who made you want to protect the gentler parts of yourself, not hide them? Protect them, honor them, build around them. That is what your presence did for me. It made me want to become the kind of man who does not only succeed, but understand. The kind who does not only provide, but listens. The kind who does not only dream, but knows how to be present in the ordinary moments that make a life sacred. What is the point of reaching the mountain and top if the heart has forgotten how to feel the sunrise? This is where love became reflection again. You reflected the version of me I was becoming, not by praising him loudly, but by making space for him quietly. You showed me that I could be ambitious and emotionally available. I could be visionary and tender. I could be strong and still admit when my soul needed rest. I could want greatness without sacrificing gentleness. That balance felt like harmony. And harmony, I have learned, is one of the most underrated forms of happiness. It is not the thrill of getting everything you want. It is the peace of not abandoning as what matters while you pursue it. The world often teaches men to separate love from purpose. It says, be hard to be successful, be distant to be respected, be untouchable to stay powerful. But I have seen another truth. A man who cannot feel deeply may build many things and still not know how to live inside them. A heart that refuses vulnerability may avoid pain, but it also avoids intimacy. And a life without intimacy becomes polished loneliness. You help me understand that emotional connection is not a distraction from strength. It is one of the roots of sustainable strength. It gives the soul somewhere to return. It gives ambition a home. I want to say this gently. You did not become meaningful to me because you completed me. That would be too small, and it would place too much weight on one human heart. But you became meaningful because you helped me remember that I was allowed to be whole. You did not fill an emptiness as much as you illuminated a room I had stopped entering. You reminded me of my own capacity for tenderness. You reminded me that my quiet happiness mattered. You reminded me that the life I was building needed not only height, but depth, not only direction, but warmth, not only victory, but peace. And maybe this is what real love does at its best. It does not make us dependent. It makes us more awake. It does not erase our solitude. It makes our solitude less lonely. It does not remove all fear. It gives us enough safety to face fear, honestly. It does not promise that life will never hurt again. It teaches us that hurt does not have to be faced without tenderness. You were part of that lesson for me, a quiet part, perhaps. But quiet does not mean small. Sometimes the quietest things become the foundation of everything. So if I speak to you now with reverence, it is because I understand more than I did before. I understand that happiness is not always a celebration. Sometimes it is a calm breath beside someone who understands your silence. I understand that love is not always a rescue. Sometimes it is a mirror held with patience. I understand that connection is not always loud chemistry. Sometimes it is emotional safety, repeated until the soul believes it. And I understand that you, in ways you may never fully know, became connected to the meaning I was searching for, beneath all my striving. Now, after all of this, I want to speak to you softly, as if we are standing at the edge of everything we have felt, but not always said. I want to gather the truth carefully, because some truths deserve to be held gently. You were the woman behind my quietest moments of happiness. Not because you made life easy, not because you solved every ache, not because your presence turned the world into something perfect. You were behind that happiness because you made honesty feel possible. You made trust feel less dangerous. You made silence feel warm. You made vulnerability feel like a doorway instead of a wound. I used to think the greatest love would arrive with certainty, with fire, with some unmistakable force that would leave no room for doubt. But I have learned that some of the greatest loves arrive quietly. They do not demand attention. They do not need to be explained to everyone. They simply change the atmosphere of the heart. They help a person breathe differently. They help a person see themselves with less cruelty. They help a person become softer without becoming smaller. And that is what your presence did. It touched the places in me that success could not reach. It gave peace to the parts of me that applause couldn't understand. But before this ends, hear this one thing. I do not want to turn you into an idea so beautiful that it stops being human. You are not a symbol only. You are not a dream only. You are not here to carry every meaning I placed upon your presence. You are a soul too. You have your own tenderness, your own fears, your own quiet battles, your own need to be seen without being asked to perform. And maybe the deepest form of love is when we stop using each other's escape and start honoring each other as truth. I see that now. I see that love must be gentle in both directions. So let this be a blessing, not a burden. Let my words not become chains around your heart, but light around the memory of what your presence means. I bless the quiet in you, the part that does not need to shout to matter. I bless the patience in you, the part that understands timing without losing hope. I bless the softness in you, the part that keeps loving even after life has given you reasons to close. I bless the strength in you, the kind that does not always announce itself, but holds steady when everything feels uncertain. If you have ever wondered whether your presence matters, let me answer from the deepest place matters, deepest place I can reach. Yes. The way you listen matters. The way you stay calm matters. The way you make room for truth matters. The way you see beyond performance matters. You may not always know whose life becomes softer because you were gentle. You may not always see the moment someone's heart exhales because you did not judge them. You may not always understand how powerful it is to be a safe place in a world that often teaches people to hide. But it matters. It matters more than noise. It matters more than display. It matters in the places where souls are healed. This is where I give the truth back to both of us. Real love is not only the feeling we chase. It is the space we create. It is the mirror we hold. It is the patience we practice. It is the courage to see and be seen without turning away. Real love does not always promise a perfect road. It promises presence on the road. It does not always remove fear. It teaches fear that it does not have to lead. It does not always speak in grand declarations. Sometimes it whispers through consistency, through a quiet moment where two people finally feel less alone and less alone. And I want to carry that lesson forward. I want to become the kind of person who protects quiet happiness when it appears. I want to stop dismissing peace just because it is not dramatic. I want to honor the people who bring calm into my life instead of only chasing what excites my wounds. I want to remember that the heart can confuse chaos with passion when it has not yet learned safety. I want to choose differently, softer, wiser, more honestly. Because you showed me that calm can be deep, patience can be passionate, presence can be more powerful than promises. Have you felt this too? That maybe the love you've been searching for is not the one that makes you lose yourself, but the one that helps you return. Maybe the person who matters most is not always the one who arrives with the loudest words, but the one whose presence makes your nervous system feel safe enough to stop fighting. Maybe happiness is not always found in becoming extraordinary in front of the world. Maybe sometimes it is found in being ordinary, honest, and fully seen by one heart that does not turn away. So I leave this with you like a quiet prayer. May you be loved by someone who does not rush your healing. May you be seen by someone who does not weaponize your truth. May you be held by a presence that protects your peace, not consumes it. May you find a love that honors your silence as much as your words. May you never mistake loudness for depth or intensity for devotion. May you remember that your softness is not weakness, your patience is not invisibility, and your quiet presence may be the very thing that helps another soul believe in safety again. And if these words ever find the woman I am speaking to, I hope she understands this. You were never just a beautiful feeling. You were a mirror. You showed me my weakness without shame, my truth without punishment, my becoming without pressure. You showed me that I could be strong and still need tenderness. You showed me that I could be ambitious and still long for peace. You showed me that a quiet love can carry more meaning than 1,000 loud promises.